My name is Madeline Porter, and I'm 32 years old. The worst moment of my life happened on a Tuesday evening while I sat alone in my small apartment in Portland, Oregon, staring at my phone screen with trembling hands. The group text glowed in the darkness. "We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely." My mother, my father, my brother, my sister, all of them in one chat, erasing me like I never existed. Tears blurred my vision as I scrolled up, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. And that's when I saw her name in the group, Sloane, my brother Garrett's new wife, someone I barely knew. In that moment, my entire world shattered. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you've ever felt betrayed by people you trusted, hit that like button because you're going to want to hear this story. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next, because what my family did to me gets even worse before it gets better. Now let me take you back to the beginning of my nightmare. I must have read that message 50 times in the first hour, each word cutting deeper than the last. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I tapped on each family member's name in the group chat, trying to make sense of who had sent it and why. The participants list stared back at me like an indictment. Lorraine, my mother; Mitchell, my father; Garrett, my younger brother; Candace, my older sister; and Sloane, the woman who had married Garrett just 8 months ago at a lavish ceremony in Connecticut that felt more like a corporate merger than a wedding. I pressed the call button next to my mother's name first, listening to it ring once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice felt like mockery now. I tried my father next, then Garrett, then Candace. Every single call went unanswered, and when I sent individual text messages pleading for explanation, the little read receipts appeared beneath each one within minutes, but no responses came. They were all seeing my messages and deliberately choosing silence, which somehow felt crueler than the original text. My mind raced backward through recent months, desperately searching for the moment it crossed some invisible line. I've always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays and sent care packages to Nebraska, even though I'd moved to Portland 3 years ago for my marketing job. When Garrett announced his engagement to Sloane last year, I'd been genuinely happy for him even though I barely knew her. They'd only dated 9 months before he proposed, which seemed fast, but I figured he knew what he wanted. Sloane came from old money on the East Coast. Her family owned some kind of investment firm, and everything about her screamed expensive. Her clothes, her jewelry, the way she pronounced certain words with that boarding school accent. Our family was solidly middle class from the Midwest, comfortable but not wealthy, and I'd worried privately that Sloane might look down on us. Instead, Shed seemed sweet at first, complimenting my mother's cooking and asking interested questions about our childhood. I'd tried hard to make her feel welcome, even though something about her smile never quite reached her eyes. The last time I'd seen everyone together was 3 weeks ago at Thanksgiving, and I'd spent the entire drive from the airport to my parents' house feeling excited about the holiday. I'd brought expensive wine, the kind Sloane had mentioned liking, and I'd helped my mother prepare the turkey and set the table while Candace arrived late and contributed nothing as usual. But looking back now, I remembered strange moments throughout that weekend. Sloane whispering to my mother in the kitchen, both of them going silent when I walked in. Garrett avoiding eye contact with me at dinner, pushing food around his plate, while Sloane touched his arm possessively. Candace being even colder than usual, barely responding when I asked about her kids. My father spending most of the weekend hiding in his workshop like he did when tension ran high in the house. I'd chalked it all up to normal family dynamics. Everyone tired from the holiday. Too many people in too small a space. But maybe I'd missed something crucial. Some offense I'd committed without realizing it. I pulled up the Notes app on my phone and started documenting every interaction I could remember from Thanksgiving, searching for the moment I'd apparently destroyed everything. I'd complimented Sloane's dress when she arrived, told her the burgundy color was so bold that I could never pull it off on my complexion. I'd asked about her job in finance, mentioned that my social media marketing work wasn't as glamorous but I loved the creativity it allowed. I'd talked about being single, joked that dating in Portland was hard because I was too picky. I'd helped wash dishes, offered to take family photos, asked Garrett about his new position at the accounting firm. Everything seemed normal, even boring. There were no arguments, no raised voices, nothing that would justify being completely cut off from my family. Unless I was missing something. Unless everyone else had seen or heard something I hadn't. Unless I was somehow the villain in a story I didn't know I was starring in. By morning, I was exhausted from crying and overanalyzing. But I needed answers, and my family clearly wasn't going to provide them. I called Ruby, my best friend from high school who still lived in Nebraska, and kept her finger on the pulse of hometown gossip. She answered on the fourth ring, and I could tell immediately from her hesitant tone that she knew something. "Maddie, hey, I was actually going to call you," she said, and those words sent ice through my veins. I asked her directly what Shed heard, and there was a long pause before she admitted that rumors about me had been circulating around town for the past 2 weeks. According to Ruby, people were saying it'd been difficult and entitled at Thanksgiving, that it insulted Sloane multiple times, that it'd caused drama and made everyone uncomfortable. I nearly dropped the phone. It insulted Sloane? It caused drama? I asked Ruby for specific examples, but she couldn't provide any. Just secondhand whispers and vague accusations that had apparently originated from my family. Ruby believed me when I insisted nothing like that had happened, but she also admitted that the rumors were widespread and detailed enough that people generally accepted them as truth. After hanging up with Ruby, I opened Instagram and Facebook, suddenly paranoid about what might be circulating online. What I found made my stomach drop. My mother had posted several family photos from Thanksgiving, and I wasn't in any of them. Photos that I knew had been present for had been cropped to exclude me, or that selected shots taken during the few minutes it'd been in the bathroom or getting something from the kitchen. Sloane's Instagram was even worse. Shed posted a carousel of images from the holiday with the caption, "So grateful for family who love and support each other unconditionally," and the comments from extended relatives gushed about how wonderful she was, how lucky Garrett was to have found her, how she fit into the family perfectly. Aunts and uncles I'd known my entire life were commenting heart emojis and welcome messages to Sloane while it'd been systematically erased from the visual narrative of that weekend. I wasn't tagged in anything, wasn't mentioned in any captions, had been digitally removed from my own family history. That night, I wrote an email to my mother because calling had proven useless. I poured my heart into it, explaining how confused and hurt I was, begging for specific information about what I'd supposedly done wrong. I emphasized how much my family meant to me, reminded her of all the effort I'd made to stay connected despite living across the country, and pleaded for a chance to make things right. I must have rewritten that email a dozen times, trying to strike the right tone between defending myself and showing I was open to feedback. Finally, I sent it at 11 p.m. and then barely slept, checking my phone every few minutes for a response. The next day at work, I was completely useless, staring at my computer screen without processing anything while I waited for my mother to write back. My boss, Preston, noticed I was distracted during our team meeting and pulled me aside afterward to ask if everything was okay. Preston was one of those genuinely kind people who actually cared about employee well-being, and when I broke down and gave him a brief explanation of what was happening, he told me to take whatever time I needed and not to worry about work while dealing with a family crisis. My mother's response arrived that evening, and it was worse than no response at all. The email was short, maybe 4 sentences total, and the tone was cold in a way I'd never experienced from her before. "Madeline, we've made our decision as a family. Your behavior has been hurtful to Sloane, and we cannot tolerate that kind of treatment toward a family member. We support Garrett and his wife completely. Please respect our wishes for space and do not contact us again." I read it over and over, searching for some softness, some hint of the mother who used to comfort me when I was upset, but it was like the email had been written by a stranger. She hadn't provided a single concrete example of hurtful behavior, hadn't offered any opportunity for discussion or clarification, had just delivered a final verdict like a judge sentencing a criminal. The fact that she'd written a family member when referring to Sloane, while effectively disowning her own daughter, wasn't lost on me. Sloane, who had been in our lives less than a year, was family. I, who had been their daughter for 32 years, was not. 2 days after my mother's devastating email, I received a Facebook message from someone I hadn't thought about in years. Shelby, my brother Garrett's ex-girlfriend from college. They'd dated for 4 years, and all of us had loved her. Shelby was warm and funny and fit into our family like she'd always been there. It'd been genuinely sad when they broke up, though Garrett had been vague about the reasons, just saying they'd grown apart. Shelby's message was short but intriguing. Madeline, I heard through mutual friends what's happening to you with your family. The exact same thing happened to me. If you want to talk, I'm here. I think you need to know the truth about Sloane. We agreed to meet for coffee that weekend at a place halfway between Portland and Seattle, where Shelby now lived. Walking into that coffee shop, I had no idea I was about to learn that my family's betrayal was part of a calculated pattern. Shelby looked older than I remembered, more tired, and when she hugged me, I felt her trembling slightly. We sat down with our drinks, and she immediately asked me to tell her everything that had happened. I walked her through the group text, the silent treatment, the vague accusations, the complete cutoff, and I watched her face grow darker with recognition as I spoke. When I finished, she nodded slowly and said the words that would change everything. She did the exact same thing to me. This is Sloane's pattern. Over the next hour, Shelby told me her story. She and Garrett had been solid, talking about marriage, looking at rings together. Then Garrett met Sloane at a business conference about 18 months ago, and within weeks, everything changed. Sloane started texting Garrett constantly, showing up at his apartment uninvited, inserting herself into his life under the guise of networking since they worked in related fields. Shelby noticed Garrett becoming distant, but he insisted Sloane was just a colleague. The manipulation began subtly, according to Shelby. Sloane would make comments to Garrett about how Shelby didn't seem supportive enough of his career, how she was holding him back from his potential, how someone with Garrett's ambitions needed a partner who understood the corporate world. Sloane started inviting herself to family dinners, befriending my parents and Candace, positioning herself as this bright, successful woman who appreciated Garrett in ways Shelby supposedly didn't. Then came the lies. Sloane told Garrett that Shelby had been rude to her at a group dinner, that Shelby had made snide comments about Sloane's clothes and job. When Garrett confronted Shelby about it, she'd been blindsided because nothing like that had happened. But Sloane was convincing, crying to my parents about how unwelcome Shelby made her feel, how disrespected she felt by Garrett's girlfriend. My parents, won over by Sloane's charm and tears, started suggesting to Garrett that maybe Shelby wasn't the right fit after all. Maybe he should consider whether his relationship was really serving him. The final blow came when Sloane orchestrated a situation where Shelby looked like the villain. There was a family barbecue, and Sloane had secretly recorded parts of conversations with Shelby throughout the day. Later, Sloane played edited versions of those recordings for my parents, cutting out all context to make innocent comments sound cruel and judgmental. In one recording, Shelby said something like, "I'm not sure finance is as fulfilling as people think," during a conversation about career satisfaction, but Sloane had cut it to sound like Shelby was directly insulting Sloane's career choice. In another, Shelby had made a joke about expensive brands being overpriced, and Sloane edited it to sound like Shelby was mocking Sloane's wealth. My parents believed every word, convinced that Shelby had been secretly hostile to Sloane all along. They told Garrett he needed to seriously reconsider his relationship, that Shelby was showing her true colors, that a man of his caliber deserved better. Within a month, Garrett broke up with Shelby, and she found herself completely cut off from the family she'd considered her own for 4 years. My parents blocked her on social media, wouldn't return her calls when she tried to explain what really happened, acted like 4 years of holidays and birthdays and family dinners meant nothing. Shelby was devastated. Lost not just her boyfriend but an entire second family, and none of them would even listen to her side of the story. 6 months later, Garrett and Sloane were engaged. Shelby told me she'd tried to warn Garrett, sent him a long letter explaining how Sloane had manipulated everyone, but he never responded. Now, sitting across from me in this coffee shop, Shelby said the words that made everything click into place. Sloane can't handle anyone being close to Garrett. She systematically removes people from his life by turning his family against them first. She uses charm and manipulation, and plays the victim perfectly, and everyone falls for it because she's beautiful and successful and knows exactly what to say. Looking at my own situation through this lens, I suddenly understood the mechanics of what had happened to me. The compliments I'd paid Sloane at Thanksgiving, meant genuinely, had probably been twisted into backhanded insults. When I said her burgundy dress was too bold for me, she likely told my family it said she looked ridiculous. When I mentioned my marketing job wasn't as glamorous as finance, she probably claimed I was being condescending about her career. When I joked about being picky in dating, she possibly spun it as me being judgmental of other people's relationships, including hers with Garrett. Every innocent interaction had been weaponized against me, recorded and edited, and presented to my family as evidence of my cruelty. And my family, already charmed by Sloane and convinced she was this perfect addition to the family, believed her without question. It never stood a chance. The revelation from Shelby should have prepared me for what came next, but somehow the escalation still caught me off guard. A week after our coffee meeting, my Aunt Penelope called me. Penelope was my father's younger sister, someone I'd always been close to growing up, someone I'd trusted to be reasonable even when others weren't. Her voice on the phone was ice cold, and she didn't even bother with pleasantries before launching into me. "Madeline, how could you treat Sloane that way after she's been nothing but kind to this family?" I tried to interrupt, to defend myself, but she talked over me. "Your mother is absolutely heartbroken by your behavior. That poor woman has been crying for weeks because her own daughter is so cruel. And Sloane, that sweet girl, she's been trying so hard to fit in and you've done nothing but make her feel unwelcome and attacked." I finally managed to ask what specific things I'd supposedly done, but Penelope just said everyone knew what I'd done and she wasn't going to waste her breath rehashing my cruelty. She hung up before I could say anything else. Over the next few days, the social fallout spread like wildfire through my extended family. Cousins who used to text me regularly went completely silent. My Uncle Randall removed me from Facebook without explanation. Family, friends back in Nebraska, people who'd known me since childhood, started avoiding my social media posts or leaving vague comments that made it clear they'd heard bad things about me. Someone had conducted a thorough smear campaign, painting me as this terrible person who'd attacked poor innocent Sloane out of jealousy or bitterness, or whatever narrative worked best. The most painful part was realizing that none of these people, not a single one, had reached out to ask my side of the story. They'd all just accepted whatever they'd been told, and decided I was guilty without trial. I decided I had to confront this in person. Sitting in my apartment in Portland while my reputation was destroyed from 2,000 miles away felt unbearable. I used the last of my savings to buy a last-minute plane ticket to Nebraska, not telling anyone I was coming because I knew they'd tell me not to. I flew out on a Saturday morning and drove a rental car straight to my parents' house, my heart pounding the entire drive. When I pulled up to the familiar ranch-style home where I'd grown up, I sat in the car for 10 minutes trying to gather courage. Finally, I walked up to the front door and knocked, since it felt wrong to just walk in like I used to. My mother answered, and the look on her face when she saw me was not surprise or happiness but something closer to anger mixed with fear. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not moving from the doorway. "We asked for space, Madeline." I begged her to let me come in, to let me explain, to please just listen to me for 5 minutes. She stood there looking torn, and then my father appeared behind her, his face hard in a way I'd never seen directed at me before. "Madeline, you need to leave," he said firmly. "This is hard enough on your mother without you showing up unannounced and causing more stress." I felt tears starting but fought them back, trying to stay calm and rational. "Dad, please. I never did what Sloane is claiming." I think she recorded me at Thanksgiving and edited the recordings to make me sound bad. "This is all a misunderstanding." My father's expression didn't soften. "That's exactly what Sloane said you'd say. That you'd play the victim and act like she's the problem. We're not falling for it, Madeline." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Sloane had predicted my defense and preemptively discredited it. She'd planned this so carefully that even my truth sounded like a lie. My mother started crying, telling me I was making everything worse, asking why I couldn't just accept that it hurt someone and take responsibility instead of making excuses. I was about to respond when Garrett appeared in the doorway with Sloane right beside him. My brother looked terrible, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes, but his face was closed off when he looked at me. Sloane, in contrast, looked perfectly composed, her arm linked through Garrett's, her expression one of practiced concern. "Madeline," she said softly, like she was talking to a frightened animal, I know this is hard for you, but maybe it's best if you go. We all need time to heal." The presumption of her words, the way she spoke like she had any authority over my relationship with my own family, made rage burn in my chest. I looked directly at Garrett, ignoring Sloane entirely. "Garrett, you're my brother. You've known me your entire life. You know I would never intentionally hurt anyone. Please, just think about whether the person accusing me of all this might have a reason to lie." Garrett's face flickered with something, maybe doubt, but then Sloane squeezed his arm and he looked down at her. She gazed up at him with these big, sad eyes and said, "It's okay, honey. She doesn't realize what she did. Some people can't see their own behavior clearly." It was masterful manipulation, positioning herself as understanding and gracious, while simultaneously reinforcing the narrative that I was delusional. Garrett looked back at me and said quietly, "Madeline, I think you should go. Sloane's been really hurt by all this, and I need to support my wife." The word wife hung in the air like a weapon. His wife. His loyalty was to Sloane now, not to the sister who'd known him for 32 years. Then Candace pushed past everyone, arms crossed over her chest, face twisted with an ugliness I recognized from childhood fights. "God, Madeline, you always had to be the center of attention, didn't you? Now that Sloane's here and getting positive attention, you can't handle not being the favorite anymore. So you're trying to destroy her. It's pathetic." I stared at my older sister, stunned by the venom in her voice. We'd never been super close as adults, but I'd never thought she actively hated me. "Candace, what are you even talking about? I've never tried to be the center of anything. I live in Portland. I barely see any of you." But Candace just shook her head. "Just leave. You're making everything worse, like you always do." I looked around at all of them, my entire family united against me, and I realized there was nothing I could say that would change their minds. They'd already decided who I was, and no amount of defending myself would penetrate their certainty. Neighbors were starting to appear in windows and on porches, drawn by the raised voices, and I realized I was creating a scene in the middle of their quiet street. The gossip this would generate would make everything even worse. With as much dignity as I could manage, I walked back to my rental car while my family watched from the porch. I drove to the end of the block before I had to pull over, because I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road. I thought the emotional devastation was the worst they could do to me, but I was wrong. 1 week after returning to Portland from that disastrous Nebraska trip, I received a certified letter that required my signature. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize, and my hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a formal demand letter stating that my parents were requesting immediate repayment of $15,000 that they claimed had been a loan for my education expenses and moving costs when I relocated to Portland 3 years ago. I read the letter 3 times before the words fully registered. My parents had given me that money as a gift, or at least that's what they'd told me at the time. My mother had said they wanted to help me get settled in Portland, that they were proud of me for pursuing my career, that they didn't want me to struggle financially during the transition. There had never been any mention of repayment, no discussion of terms, no signed agreement of any kind. The letter informed me that I had 30 days to remit full payment, or my parents would pursue legal action to recover the funds plus interest and legal fees. 30 days to come up with $15,000 I didn't have and hadn't budgeted for because Id believed it was a gift. I called my mother immediately, not caring anymore that they'd asked for no contact. She answered, probably because she saw the lawyer's area code and expected this call. "Mom, what is this? You told me that money was a gift. You never said anything about it being a loan." Her voice was cold and matter-of-fact. "We're done supporting your lifestyle, Madeline. We need that money for Garrett and Sloane's house down payment. They're starting their life together and we want to help them." The implication was clear. They were willing to help the good child, the one who'd chosen the right spouse, not the problem child who'd attacked that spouse. I pressed her about the lack of any written agreement, any previous indication this was a loan, but she just said their lawyer had all the documentation they needed, and I'd receive it in court if I refused to pay. I hung up and immediately looked at my bank account, even though I already knew what I'd find. $4,000 in savings, carefully accumulated over the past year. My monthly expenses in Portland ran about $2,000 between rent, utilities, student loan payments, food, and transportation. Even if I stopped eating and canceled every subscription service, I couldn't possibly save $11,000 in 30 days. My credit cards were already carrying balances from the emergency trip to Nebraska, and taking out a personal loan with high interest to pay back a fictional debt would put me in a financial hole I might never climb out of. This wasn't about the money, I realized. This was about destroying me completely, removing any stability I had left, making sure I couldn't even afford to fight back legally. If I couldn't pay, my parents would sue me, which would trash my credit and potentially affect my employment. If I did somehow scrape together the money, it'd be financially devastated anyway. It was a trap with no good options. My work performance, which had already been suffering, completely collapsed under this new stress. I missed deadlines for the first time in my career. During a client presentation, I lost my train of thought halfway through and had to let my colleague take over. Preston called me into his office after that meeting, his expression concerned but firm. He explained that he understood I was dealing with a family crisis, but that the quality of my work had become a problem the company couldn't ignore any longer. A client had called to complain about my distraction during their project kickoff. If things didn't improve quickly, he might have to put me on a performance improvement plan, which was corporate speak for the step before being fired. I apologized and promised to do better, but I knew I was drowning and couldn't see a way to the surface. Losing my job on top of everything else would destroy me completely, which was probably exactly what Sloane and my family wanted. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and tried to create a budget that would somehow produce $15,000 in 30 days. No matter how I rearranged the numbers, it was impossible. I looked at predatory payday loan websites, read the terms with growing horror at the interest rates, and seriously considered whether I had any other choice. I was about to fill out an application when my phone rang. It was Shelby, calling to check on me because we'd been texting occasionally since our coffee meeting. I broke down and told her about the demand letter, and she immediately told me not to take out any loans. This is financial abuse, Madeline. They're trying to destroy you economically because they already destroyed you socially. Don't let them. She suggested I consult with a lawyer about whether my parents had any legal standing, and while I knew I couldn't afford a lawyer, she insisted there were sometimes free consultations available. She also reminded me that Sloane had probably orchestrated this entire thing, convincing my parents that punishing me financially was justified because I was such a terrible person. I barely slept that night or for many nights after. The stress was affecting me physically now. I stopped eating regular meals because food made me nauseous and I was trying to save money anyway. I lost 12 pounds in 2 weeks, weight I couldn't afford to lose from my already small frame. Sleep became impossible without medication, and even with it, I'd wake up every few hours in a panic. I started having intrusive thoughts about just giving up entirely, about how much easier it would be to not exist than to face this nightmare every day. The only thing that kept me going was stubborn pride and fury that Sloane was winning. Meanwhile, Sloane's Instagram showed a perfect life unfolding. She posted a photo of a family dinner, everyone smiling around my parents' dining table, with the caption, "So grateful for family who support healthy boundaries." The comments from my mother and Candace were effusive with love and heart emojis. I realized this was coordinated psychological warfare designed to break me completely, and it was working. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon at work. I stood up from my desk to go to the bathroom and the room tilted sideways. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the cold tile floor with my coworker Bryn kneeling beside me, her face scared, telling me not to move because Shed called for help. Paramedics arrived and took me to the emergency room, where tests revealed severe dehydration, malnutrition, and what the doctor termed acute stress reaction. My blood pressure was dangerously low. My electrolytes were imbalanced. The doctor asked pointed questions about my eating habits and mental state, clearly concerned this might be an eating disorder or self-harm situation. I tried to explain about the family crisis and financial pressure, and the doctor's expression shifted from medical concern to something more psychological. Before releasing me, she insisted a social worker come speak with me. The social worker, a middle-aged man named Curtis with kind eyes and a patient demeanor, sat beside my hospital bed and asked me to tell him what was happening in my life. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the IV fluids, or just the relief of someone finally asking me directly. But I told him everything. The group text, the cutoff, Sloane's manipulation, my family's betrayal, the financial demands, the complete destruction of my life over the past few months. Curtis listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes, and when I finished, he said something that reframed everything. Madeline, what you're describing is a textbook case of family scapegoating combined with emotional and financial abuse. This is not normal family conflict. This is systematic targeting. He explained that in dysfunctional family systems, one person often gets designated as the scapegoat, the one blamed for all problems, the one everyone else can unite against to avoid dealing with their own issues. Curtis suggested that Sloane had entered my family system and quickly identified me as the easiest target for scapegoating because I lived far away and couldn't defend myself easily. By creating a villain, Sloane made herself the victim hero, which gave her enormous power and sympathy within the family. My parents and siblings went along with it because humans naturally prefer simple narratives, and the story of me being the bad guy was simpler than examining their own dysfunction or questioning the motives of charming, successful Sloane. Curtis gave me resources about narcissistic family systems and strongly recommended I start seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma. He was careful to note that he couldn't diagnose Sloane with anything based on my secondhand account, but he emphasized that her behavior pattern matched what's often seen in highly manipulative individuals who target and isolate people systematically. I started seeing Dr. Ramona Fletcher, a therapist Preston helped me find through our company's employee assistance program. The first session was hard because I spent most of it defending my family, insisting they were just confused and manipulated by Sloane, that they were good people who'd made a mistake. Dr. Fletcher listened patiently and then asked a question that stopped me cold. Why are they so easily manipulated? Why don't they ask questions or seek the truth? Why don't they care enough about you to investigate before cutting you off completely? I didn't have good answers. Over the following weeks, Dr. Fletcher gently guided me through examination of my childhood and family dynamics. We talked about patterns I'd never named before, how I'd always been the responsible one, expected to be perfect and accommodate everyone, how Candace was rebellious and got away with everything, how Garrett was the baby who got coddled and protected, how I was neither special nor problematic, just there, expected to function without creating trouble or needing much attention. The realizations came in waves, each one painful. I remembered being 12 and blamed for money missing from my mother's purse, even though it turned out Candace had taken it to buy cigarettes. I remembered being 16 and asked by my father if I'd encouraged Garrett to break a window with a baseball, even though I'd been at the library when it happened. I remembered getting straight A's and being told that's what we expect from you, while Candace brought home B's and got taken out for celebration dinners. I remembered organizing family reunions and holiday gatherings as an adult, doing all the emotional labor, and having my mother complain to relatives that I was controlling and had to have things my way. The pattern had been there my entire life. It'd always been the scapegoat. I just hadn't recognized it because I'd been too busy trying to earn love through perfect behavior. Sloane hadn't destroyed a loving family. She'd exposed a family that was already broken, already primed to turn on me because they always had. My friend Ruby finally told me the full truth about how people in Nebraska had talked about me. Maddie, I'm sorry I didn't say this before, but people have been saying for years that you're difficult. Your parents would make comments at church events about how you were so demanding as a child, how you always needed attention, how you were jealous of your siblings. I never thought much about it because parents complain about their kids sometimes, but looking back now, it sounds really dysfunctional. Hearing this broke something open in me. My parents had been undermining me publicly for years, creating a narrative that I was problematic, setting up the infrastructure for the community to easily believe I was cruel to Sloane. This wasn't a recent manipulation. This was decades in the making, and Sloane had simply leveraged existing dysfunction to her advantage. The grief was overwhelming. I wasn't just grieving the family I'd lost. I was grieving the family I'd never actually had, the loving, supportive parents I'd believed existed despite all evidence to the contrary. I'd spent 32 years performing for acceptance that was never really available, trying to earn love from people who weren't capable of giving it unconditionally. Dr. Fletcher kept emphasizing that this realization, while painful, was also freeing. You can't fail at a rigged game, Madeline. You've been playing a game where the rules were designed to make you lose, no matter what you did. Understanding that is the first step toward healing. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. I started eating regularly again and regaining weight, my physical health slowly improving, but the emotional wounds felt bottomless. I consulted with a budget lawyer named Hugh Patterson about the financial demand from my parents. Hugh reviewed everything and was blunt in his assessment. They have no legal standing whatsoever without a signed loan agreement. This is harassment, potentially extortion. I can send a cease and desist letter explaining that you'll countersue for emotional distress if they pursue this frivolous claim. The letter cost me $300 I couldn't really spare. But Hugh assured me it would likely make the problem disappear. Most people making empty legal threats back down immediately when faced with actual legal pushback. He was right. A week after Hugh sent the letter, the threats stopped. But my father called me, furious, demanding to know how I dared threaten my own parents with lawyers. I recorded the call on my phone, legal in Oregon with one-party consent, and his words damned him. "We're your parents. You owe us respect and gratitude. We never should have helped you with anything if this is how you treat us. Sloane was right about you from the beginning. You're selfish and ungrateful, and we wish we'd listened to her sooner." Shelby helped me start documenting everything systematically. We created a detailed timeline of events with screenshots of every message, every social media post, every piece of evidence I had. We included Shelby's parallel story and started reaching out to others who might have experienced Sloane's manipulation. Preston provided a written statement about my character and work performance before the family crisis. My coworker Bryn did the same. My friend Ruby documented the rumors that had spread in Nebraska, and when they'd started, we built a case not for court, but for truth, a comprehensive record that clearly showed the pattern of targeted destruction. I didn't know if I'd ever need this documentation, but having it organized and validated by others gave me a sense of control I'd been lacking. Hugh sent the cease and desist letter to my parents, and while it expected anger, my father's phone call still shocked me with its vitriol. "How dare you threaten us with lawyers?" my father shouted when I answered. I stayed calm, noting that they'd threatened me first with their demand letter for a non-existent debt. "That was different," he insisted. "We're your parents. We have a right to expect repayment for everything we've invested in you over the years." I pointed out that parenting wasn't an investment expecting returns, and his response was chilling. "You've always been the problem child, Madeline. Even when you seemed to be doing well, there was always something off about you." Sloane saw it immediately. "She told us you'd be trouble, and she was right." The casual way he said it, like my entire childhood and young adulthood had been evaluated and found wanting, like it'd been under suspicion my whole life, made something inside me go cold and hard. It'd been recording the call, and I asked him point blank, "Dad, do you actually believe I attacked Sloane, or are you just willing to believe it because it's easier than questioning her?" There was a long pause, and then he said, "Your presence in this family causes conflict, Madeline. Whether you mean to or not, you create problems. Sloane makes Garrett happy. You make everyone miserable. It's basic math." So that was it. The truth finally out in the open. I didn't matter as much as their comfort. My truth didn't matter as much as avoiding difficult conversations. My decades of trying to be a good daughter meant nothing compared to maintaining smooth relationships with Sloane. I told my father I'd received his message loud and clear and hung up. The recording was devastating to listen to later, but it was also validation. Head admitted, essentially, that they didn't actually care if I'd done what Sloane claimed. They just preferred the version of reality where I was the problem because it was simpler. Then Sloane made a critical error. She sent me a direct message on Instagram, probably unable to resist gloating. "Madeline, I genuinely wish things could have been different between us. I've tried so hard to be kind to you, but you seem determined to see me as an enemy. Your family deserves peace, and I hope someday you can find it in yourself to move on and let them be happy." I stared at the message, recognizing it for what it was, a performance for her own records, something she could screenshot and show people as evidence of her attempting reconciliation. But I'd learned a few things over the past months. I didn't respond immediately, letting her think I might engage. She sent a follow-up message later that day. I know you're reading these messages. Your silence speaks volumes about your inability to take responsibility. Your family has finally found happiness without the constant drama you brought to every gathering. Why won't you just let them be? I took screenshots of everything and then responded with a simple, factual statement. Sloane, I have not contacted any family member in over 6 weeks. I have respected their request for distance. If I am still the topic of conversation in the family, that is because someone keeps bringing me up. I hope you and Garrett are happy together. I have nothing more to say. Her response came within minutes, and it was a crack in her perfect facade. You are still very much a topic because your behavior traumatized everyone. Your presence haunts this family. The damage you've done doesn't just disappear because you've finally stopped actively creating problems. The message revealed that she couldn't let me fade into the background. She needed me to remain the villain, the constant threat, the topic of conversation that kept everyone focused on external danger rather than examining her. I screenshot that too and didn't respond further. Shelby and I kept investigating and found more of Sloane's victims. Through mutual connections, we located Jasper, Sloane's ex-boyfriend from college. Jasper was initially reluctant to talk, but once he started, the story poured out. Head dated Sloane for 2 years during undergrad, and Shed systematically isolated him from his family and friends, using the exact same tactics Shed used on me. Shed lie about things people said, create conflicts out of nothing, play the victim so convincingly that Jasper's family cut him off to protect her. Even after they broke up, his family wouldn't listen to his explanations. He hadn't spoken to his parents or siblings in 3 years. Through Jasper, we found Clarice, Sloane's former roommate and best friend. Clarice had been cut off when Sloane started dating Clarice's brother. Sloane accused Clarice of being jealous and possessive, turned the brother completely against his sister, and destroyed their relationship. The pattern was so consistent, it was almost mechanical. We compiled all of this into a document, multiple people from different periods of Sloane's life, all telling the same story of manipulation, isolation, and destruction. None of us had known each other before, had no reason to coordinate our stories, but the tactics were identical. The document wasn't for legal purposes, since Sloane hadn't actually committed any crimes, but it was evidence of pattern that might eventually be useful. Then, something unexpected happened. I received an email from my Uncle Randall's wife, Daphne, whom I'd always liked but hadn't been particularly close to. Madeline, she wrote, I don't believe what they're saying about you. I've been watching Sloane very carefully at family gatherings, and something is deeply wrong with that woman. Randall won't listen to me, but I want you to know that I see what's happening and I believe you. It was the first time anyone from the family's inner circle had expressed doubt, and I cried reading her email. Daphne became my secret source of information about what was happening in the family. She told me that Garrett seemed increasingly unhappy and withdrawn, that Candace had been fighting with my parents more than usual, that my mother cried frequently, though she insisted the tears were about me and my betrayal. That Sloane dominated every gathering, controlling conversations and attention, with everyone walking on eggshells around her. That small cracks were forming in the perfect facade, tiny hints that maybe everyone wasn't as unified and happy as their social media suggested. Dr. Fletcher counseled patients when I told her this. Truth has a way of revealing itself, Madeline. Your job right now isn't to prove anything or force recognition. Your job is to heal and decide what kind of life you want to build, with or without these people in it. The advice was wise but frustrating. I wanted vindication. I wanted my family to know the truth and apologize. I wanted Sloane exposed and expelled, but wanting those things didn't make them happen, and tying my healing to their eventual realization kept me trapped in the dysfunction. 6 months after the initial group text that destroyed my life, I received an urgent phone call from Daphne. Something had happened at Garrett and Sloane's house. Neighbors had heard screaming, seen Garrett leave with a suitcase, and had gone to stay at my parents' house. Details were scarce, but Daphne said Sloane was calling family members hysterically, claiming Garrett had verbally attacked her and was having some kind of mental breakdown. The narrative being pushed was that the stress of dealing with the Madeline situation had finally broken Garrett, that Head turned on poor innocent Sloane in a moment of instability, and that everyone needed to rally around her during this difficult time. But something felt different this time, Daphne said. My parents seemed less convinced by Sloane's tears. Garrett wasn't responding to anyone's calls or texts. The carefully constructed story had cracks visible even to people who'd believed everything until now. Then, late that night, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, trained by months of isolation to expect nothing good, but something made me pick up. It was Garrett, and he was drunk and crying. "Maddie, I'm so sorry," he said, words slurring. "You were right about everything. I've been living in hell, and I couldn't tell anyone because she'd destroy me like she destroyed you." My heart pounded as I listened to my brother unravel. He said Head wanted to contact me 100 times, but Sloane checked his phone constantly, monitored his emails, tracked his location, controlled every aspect of his life. She'd forbidden him from talking to me, threatened to leave him and turn the whole family against him if he defied her. Head watched her systematically dismantle my life, and had been too afraid to defend me because he knew Head'd be next. The guilt had been eating him alive, and tonight Head finally snapped and confronted her about her lies. The full truth spilled out in pieces between Garrett's sobs. Yes, Sloane had recorded me at Thanksgiving. Yes, Shed edited those recordings to remove all context and make my innocent comments sound malicious. Yes, Shed shown the edited versions to the family and lied about other things it'd supposedly said. Yes, Shed orchestrated the entire campaign to isolate me because Shed perceived me as a threat to her control over Garrett. Shed researched how to turn families against specific members, participated in online forums about manipulation tactics, and planned my destruction methodically. Garrett had found her search history weeks ago: how to isolate family members, how to make family believe someone is toxic, ways to turn parents against their children. Head found screenshots of her planning out exactly how to frame me, which of my comments to record and edit, which family members to approach first to maximize the spread of lies. When Garrett confronted her about it tonight, Shed first tried to deny everything, then claim he was misunderstanding her searches, then finally admit it but say Shed done it for his own good, because I was bad for him. She said I was too close to him, that our sibling relationship was unhealthy, that she needed to create distance between us for their marriage to thrive. When Garrett called that insane, Shed threatened him. Shed said she would tell everyone had been abusive to her throughout their marriage, that Shed destroy his reputation and career, that Shed make sure our parents never spoke to him again. Shed promised to ruin him so thoroughly that Head wish Head never questioned her. That's when Garrett packed a bag and left. He was hiding at our parents' house now, too scared to go back, terrified of what Sloane might do, finally understanding the cage Head been living in. The next morning, Garrett showed everything to Mitchell and Lorraine. Sloane's search history, her forum posts, her methodical planning of my destruction, the edited audio files with the original unedited versions for comparison. My parents were initially defensive, having invested so much in believing Sloane and rejecting me. But the evidence was undeniable. The woman they'd welcomed into the family with such open arms, the woman they'd chosen over their own daughter, had been coldly and deliberately destroying their family from the inside. Lorraine called me the following evening, and I let it ring 4 times before answering, my heart racing with vindication and anger. "Honey, I'm so sorry," she said, crying. "We were so wrong. Sloane lied about everything. We should have listened to you. We should have asked questions. We destroyed you, and we're so sorry." But I was cold in a way I'd never been with my mother before. "Why are you calling me, Mom? I thought you needed distance. I thought my presence caused you pain." She tried to explain, to justify, to make me understand how convincing Sloane had been, but I cut her off. "I tried to tell you. I begged you to listen. You refused. You chose a woman you'd known less than a year over the daughter you'd raised for 32 years. You threatened me with lawyers. You cut me off completely. And now that it's convenient, now that your son is suffering, you suddenly believe the truth you could have discovered months ago if you'd cared enough to look." Lorraine sobbed on the other end of the line, but I felt nothing. The daughter Hod desperately wanted her mother's love and approval had died somewhere in the last 6 months. The woman Hod survived didn't trust so easily anymore. Mitchell took longer to come around, his pride wounded too deeply for quick apologies. Garrett had to confront him directly. "You chose a stranger over Madeline," Garrett said. "You had evidence, you said, but you never verified it. You never asked for Maddie's side. You just believed the worst because it was easier than dealing with complexity." Mitchell had tried to defend their actions, saying they'd done what any reasonable people would do given the information they had. Garrett shut that down. Reasonable people ask questions. Reasonable people investigate. Reasonable people don't financially threaten their own children. You were lazy and cruel, and Maddie almost died because of it. She passed out at work from stress and malnutrition. Do you understand that? Your daughter almost died, and you were posting happy family photos with her replacement. The family dynamics imploded rapidly. Garrett filed for divorce, and Sloane immediately launched her final attack, posting on social media that Garrett had been emotionally abusive throughout their marriage, and she was escaping a dangerous situation. She created fake accounts to support her story, posted edited text conversations that made Garrett look controlling and mean, and tried to rally public sympathy. But this time the family didn't believe her. This time they knew her pattern. They reported her fake accounts, posted public statements correcting her lies, and stood behind Garrett despite his fear that they'd turn on him like they'd turned on me. It was the support I'd never gotten, and watching it play out on social media was both validating and painful. My parents invited me to come to Nebraska for a family meeting where everyone would apologize properly, and we could begin to repair what had been broken. Dr. Fletcher asked me what I wanted to do, whether I was ready for that confrontation or needed more time. I thought about it for a week. Part of me wanted to refuse, to make them suffer uncertainty the way they'd made me suffer. But another part needed to look them in the eye and hear them acknowledge what they'd done. I bought another plane ticket to Nebraska, this time with Daphne's promise that she'd pick me up from the airport and that the family understood this meeting was on my terms. I was terrified the entire flight, uncertain whether I was walking into healing or just more hurt. The family meeting happened in my parents' living room, the same room where we'd celebrated countless holidays and birthdays, now heavy with tension and unspoken pain. Mitchell, Lorraine, Garrett, and Candace were all there, arranged awkwardly on furniture like strangers waiting for a bus. I sat in the armchair near the door, leaving myself an escape route, my body language closed and defensive. No one seemed to know how to start, so we sat in painful silence for what felt like hours but was probably 2 minutes. Finally, Lorraine spoke, her voice shaking. "Madeline, we failed you in every possible way as parents. We believed lies without investigating them. We cut you off without any real conversation or chance for you to defend yourself. We almost destroyed you to protect someone who was actually destroying all of us. There's no excuse for what we did, and I understand if you can never forgive us." Mitchell struggled visibly with what to say, his pride still wounded, his discomfort with emotional vulnerability obvious. "I don't have the right words," he admitted. "I failed as a father in ways I'm still coming to understand. I threatened my own daughter with legal action over a made-up debt. I chose cruelty when I should have chosen curiosity. I let a manipulative stranger convince me that my daughter was the enemy, and I never questioned it because questioning would have been hard. I understand if you never forgive me, Madeline. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself." Garrett went next, and he was still the most broken of all of them. "Maddie, I stood by and watched Sloane destroy you. I participated in your destruction because I was too weak to stand up to her. I valued my own comfort over your safety and well-being. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking for it anyway because I can't live with this guilt." Then Candace spoke, and her honesty was brutal. "I need to tell you the truth, Madeline. I was jealous of you. I've been jealous my entire life. You were always the responsible one, the one who had her life together, and I resented you for it. When Sloane gave me an excuse to tear you down, I took it eagerly. I didn't even care if what she was saying was true. I just wanted you to hurt the way it hurt for years, watching you be the good daughter while I was the screw-up. That's unforgivable, and I know it, but I'm trying to be honest about why I did what I did." Her confession hit harder than the others because at least it was real. She wasn't hiding behind claims of being deceived. She was admitting she'd knowingly participated in my destruction out of petty jealousy. I let them all finish before I responded. and when I did, my voice was steady and cold in a way that scared even me. You didn't just hurt me. You tried to erase me. You systematically destroyed my reputation, my mental health, my physical health, my financial stability, and nearly my career. I passed out at work and ended up in the emergency room because I was so devastated I stopped eating. I considered taking out predatory loans that would have destroyed my future because you threatened me with fake legal action. I had intrusive thoughts about whether I should even continue existing because the pain was so overwhelming. You did that. Not Sloane alone. All of you. And you did it easily, quickly, without hesitation or investigation. I watched them absorb this, saw the guilt and shame and horror on their faces, and felt no satisfaction. Hurting them didn't heal me. I told them I wasn't ready to just go back to normal, that the daughter who desperately sought their approval and validation didn't exist anymore. Shed died slowly over 6 months of abandonment and betrayal. The woman sitting in front of them now was someone different, someone harder, someone who understood that blood relation didn't equal love or loyalty. I set boundaries that felt alien coming out of my mouth. I said that any rebuilding of our relationships would be slow and conditional. I required that they all start therapy to understand why this happened, not just blaming Sloane, but examining the family dysfunction that made them such easy marks for her manipulation. I told them I'd decide on my own timeline whether I wanted them in my life at all, and that my decision would be based on their sustained actions over months or years, not their words in this single conversation. They agreed to everything, knowing they had no right to demand anything different. I flew back to Portland the next day and returned to my routine of therapy with Dr. Fletcher, my job where Preston had been incredibly patient, my small circle of friends who'd supported me through everything. I continued processing the trauma, not just of the past 6 months, but of 32 years in a family system that had never been as healthy as I'd believed. Over the following months, my mother and I had weekly phone calls that were awkward and sometimes painful, but slowly rebuilding a foundation of trust. She was in therapy working on understanding her failures as a parent. She sent me articles she was reading about family scapegoating and narcissistic dynamics, showing me she was trying to educate herself. It didn't fix the past, but it showed effort toward a different future. Garrett's divorce from Sloane dragged on for 8 months, with her fighting dirty every step of the way and making wild accusations that Garrett had to constantly defend against. But he documented everything, kept records of her manipulative behavior, and eventually, the divorce was finalized. He started rebuilding his life, going to therapy to understand how Head ended up in such a toxic relationship and why Head been willing to sacrifice his sister to maintain it. Slowly, gradually, through consistent actions rather than grand gestures, he began earning back my trust. We started with emails, moved to occasional phone calls, and eventually to coffee when I visited Nebraska months later. It wasn't the easy sibling relationship Wed had before, but it was something real built on honesty rather than avoidance. Candace also went to therapy, working through her jealousy and insecurity that had poisoned our relationship. She sent me letters monthly with no expectation of response, sharing what she was learning about herself, taking accountability for specific actions, never making excuses. After 6 months, I agreed to meet her for coffee during a Nebraska visit, and we had the most honest conversation we'd ever had as adults. She admitted Shed always felt like a failure compared to me, that our parents' different treatment of us had created resentment Shed never addressed healthily. I shared my own side, how Eid felt invisible and taken for granted, how being the responsible one had been its own kind of prison. We both cried, and while it didn't erase decades of dysfunction, it was a start. Mitchell was the slowest to change, his pride the biggest obstacle to real growth. He resisted therapy initially, finally agreed only when Lorraine threatened to leave him if he didn't address his issues. Gradually, through months of therapy, he began understanding how his authoritarian parenting style and emotional unavailability had created the conditions for our family's dysfunction. He wrote me a long letter about a year after everything imploded, not making excuses but taking full accountability for his actions and their consequences. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just said he needed me to know that he understood what had done and was working to become someone different. The letter made me cry for the father I'd never really had and the one he might still become. 1 year after the devastating group text, I was thriving in ways I never had before. I'd been promoted at work, my performance exceptional now that I wasn't drowning in trauma. I'd built a solid friend group in Portland, people who knew my whole story and chose me anyway. I was still in therapy, still processing, still healing, but I was also stronger and more self-aware than I'd ever been. My relationships with family members were cautiously rebuilding, each at its own pace, with clear boundaries that protected my well-being. Trust wasn't fully restored and might never be, but a foundation was forming based on honesty and sustained effort, rather than obligation and denial. The most important realization was that I no longer needed their validation to feel valuable. Surviving this trauma taught me that my worth existed independent of their recognition. I could choose who got access to my life, could set boundaries without guilt, could walk away from relationships that harmed me regardless of blood connection. Blood relation didn't equal obligation to accept abuse or manipulation. I deserved people who believed in me, who asked questions rather than accepting accusations, who chose curiosity over convenience when conflicts arose. Some family bonds might heal over time, others might remain broken. Either outcome was acceptable because my well-being no longer depended on their acceptance. Looking back, I can see that Sloane exposed cracks that already existed, rather than creating them from nothing. Healthy families don't abandon members without investigation. Healthy families communicate, seek truth, value loyalty earned over decades more than charm displayed over months. My family's willingness to turn on me revealed dysfunction that had been there my whole life, just less visible. Surviving their betrayal forced me to see that truth. And while the seeing was agonizing, it was also ultimately freeing. I was no longer performing for acceptance that was always conditional. I was building a life based on authentic connections, with people who proved through actions that they valued me. Now, sitting in my Portland apartment on the anniversary of that terrible text message, my phone buzzes with a message from my mother. "Thinking of you today, honey. No pressure to respond. I just want you to know I love you, and am grateful you're still giving us chances to do better." I smile slightly, a real smile this time, rather than a bitter one. The road to healing is long and uncertain, and I don't know where it ends. Maybe we'll find our way back to something resembling a functional family. Maybe we won't. But for the first time in my life, I'm okay with either outcome. I've learned that I can survive the worst kind of betrayal and come out stronger. Whatever comes next, I know it'll be okay. And honestly, that knowledge, that certainty in my own resilience and worth, is the best gift this nightmare could have given me. Have you ever been scapegoated by your own family or had someone turn your loved ones against you? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments because I'd love to hear how others survived similar situations. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future stories about overcoming family trauma and finding strength in impossible situations. Share this video with anyone who might be going through something similar, because sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope you find the courage to set boundaries with anyone who tries to erase you from your own life. You deserve people who believe in you, who ask questions, and who choose you even when it's hard. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember that surviving betrayal doesn't make you weak. It makes you a warrior.